leadership qualities of the Cumberland School Committee. Cumberland has done an amazing job with our RICAS. When RICAS results were announced in November, I got a call from Linda Borg, the Providence Journal reporter, and she said, is there any silver lining here? I said, yeah, there's some really excellent results in some of our communities. And one community in particular was Cumberland. They have a slogan that they've operated under, which is worked well for them, which is no excuses, just results. And despite the fact that as a school district, their per pupil costs are lower than virtually anybody in the state, with the exception of a couple of the urban communities, they were able to achieve remarkable results on RICAS. And that's a testament to the leadership of the superintendent and the assistant superintendent and the school committee. So you heard a little bit about the struggles that the Cumberland School Committee has had in getting adequate funding from their town leaders, and it has been a struggle. But that didn't deter them from staying the course and operating in the best interest of students and finding new and creative ways of closing the achievement gap between us and Massachusetts. So I'd like to introduce to the panel, for the panel coming up, Bob Mitchell, the superintendent of Cumberland Schools, Tony Damana, the assistant superintendent of schools. They're going to take you through a presentation of some of the things that they did. They work with their school committee in focusing on those student achievement issues and the results that they got. Again, out of 36 school districts in the state and 22 charter schools and 3 or 4 state schools, the Cumberland School District was third in English language arts and third in math. So that's a remarkable story.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you don't mind that I'm not really good at sitting and talking. I'm the kind of person that needs to move around a little bit, so if you don't mind, I'll do that. I am Bob Mitchell, the superintendent of schools, and this is the assistant superintendent of schools, Tony Damana, a very talented guy and very talented educator. And we are honored to be here this afternoon to share with you some of the things that we have done as a school district over these last 5 to 7 years, that has worked well for us, because as you can see, you'll see in a minute how we have definitely improved on our state assessment scores. But since this is a school committee association event, I think it's important that you all know about the relationship that the leadership has, that is central office leadership, has with the school committee. And I can tell you, and I mean this sincerely, I'm not the kind of person that's going to say anything that's not true. You'll hear that throughout the presentation. But I must say that we are very fortunate. I am very fortunate as the superintendent to have a really good relationship with the school committee. They are incredibly supportive. They have really high expectations for us, but in a positive way. And I believe that I spend at least a few minutes a day, every day, talking to the chair of the school committee, so that we have open and honest communication all the time. So I think one of the reasons why we're doing well is because we have a very supportive school committee, and we are grateful for that. Because, to be honest, I know that some of my colleagues don't have that kind of relationship with the school committee. So we are very, very fortunate. So, I think the reason that we're here today, the single biggest reason that we're here today, is to talk about how we have improved over these last 4 or 5 years or so. As you can see, that is a pretty impressive trajectory. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we made that happen. I think it's important for everybody to know that, there's always this sense of urgency when state assessment scores come out. You get all kinds of feedback from the press, and everyone is upset, especially when, your school district isn't performing as well as the next school district over, or, your state is not performing as well as the state that is rated #1 in the nation. It is not a sprint, it is a marathon. And for those of us who have been in education for many, many, many years, you can understand how it would take time for us to at least start to make some positive ground in our performance as a state. One of the most important things that I think we need to do is do what Massachusetts has done, and that is stay the course. We need to stay the course. And I think one of the reasons why we have done well in Cumberland is because we have made some really good decisions about curriculum, teaching and learning, professional development, and we have stayed the course. Despite the fact that we have been, during my tenure as assistant superintendent and superintendent in Cumberland, the lowest funded per pupil in the state, right? So you'll hear in a minute, a lot about what it has taken for us to make a move. So let me just share very quickly. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on these next 2 slides, but let me share with you why I wanted you to see this information. So if you Google characteristics of effective schools and characteristics of effective school districts, these are the things that always come up. There are there are no surprises. There are 9 things that every school district that is doing well, every school and every school district that is doing well, they have these things in common. And one of the things that was really interesting to me, I got my master's degree in 1991. These same things were in place then. There are no surprises. There are no secrets. The question is, are we doing those things? So that is the only reason why I had all of these things up there. Let's move on to a couple more slides, Tony. Okay, so the real question is, can you move back one? Move up one, right there. No, one more. No, one more. Forward. I'm sorry. Okay, all right, yeah. Okay, so I guess the real question is, how did we move from 17th in our performance on the state assessment to 4th in just 4 years? In ELA, and we also made some significant improvement in math, and you'll see that as well. So, first of all, I think we have a really good strategic plan, one that was developed by all of our constituents in the town. So we had students, staff, parents, school committee members, town council members. The entire community was represented in some way. I think we had close to 300 people involved in that process. And we came out with a very concise, strategic plan. And one of the most important things that sticks in my head about the strategic plan is that we expect to be a top 5 performing school district by the year 2020. We are in year 2 of our strategic plan. We've already done it. This is grades 3 through 8. We've already done it in grades 3 through 8. Now, part of our challenge is to get the high school there. So everyone knows in our school community that we want to be one of the top 5 performing school districts in the state. And we are making progress there. As I mentioned, there is high expectations for everyone. And I can tell you, as a superintendent, I have high expectations for myself. I have always felt a tremendous responsibility as an educational leader to improve the performance of the students that I am responsible for. And I think all of the leadership in our district feels that way. So we have high expectations for everyone. As I mentioned, we want to be a top 5 performing school district in the state. As I have also mentioned, we have made some really good decisions about curriculum. And here's another really important point I think that needs to be made. Decisions are not top-down. I think that decisions that are most impactful are the ones that are made bottom-up, right? So every single important decision that we make involves teachers, staff that is going to be most significantly impacted by the decisions that we make. So we made, for example, when all of the states in this country decided to go to the Common Core state standards, we did a lot of work, a lot of research to find a curriculum or curricula that we thought would align best with those Common Core state standards. Those things that students are expected to know and students are expected to be able to do. So we decided on Engage New York, which is core knowledge, language arts for grades K2, and grades 3 through 12 is expeditionary learning. And for math, it is Eureka Math. So we made that decision several years ago, and we stayed the course. Like, I got to be honest with you, I hear all the time about how districts are changing their curriculum all the time. When you change it takes, I think, a significant amount of time to really get comfortable with the choices that you make around teaching and learning. So we have stayed the course, and we have spent a lot of, I think, really valuable time on professional development to prepare our teachers well to teach this. This is something that there are things that we can do, like you're going to hear a lot about how we look at data, how we use data and research to drive our decisions. But we talk about this all the time. The definition of insanity. And what is amazing to me is that people continue to do the same thing over and over and over again, but they expect different results. There is no way that students and staff are going to perform differently if they continue doing things the same way. So it seems to me, as leadership, and that includes the school committee, it seems to me that as leadership, we have a responsibility to make sure that we are improving. So what is amazing to me is kids don't change. The students haven't changed in the last 5 years. In the time that we've gone from 17th to 4th, do you think the kids have changed? The kids haven't changed. We've changed. So I say this all the time to staff, and you know what? Who's going to argue with this? Unless we get better, all of us, everybody in this room, all of the adults that we're responsible for, all the staff, unless we get better, and I'm including myself, unless the adults get better, the kids aren't going to get better. And the only way that we get better is if we make some really good choices around the professional development that we have our staff do. And we talk about this all the time. Accountability. We have to hold ourselves accountable to ensuring that students improve. We'll talk a little bit more about data-driven decision-making in a second. So I'm going to turn this whole conversation around the proficiency over to Tony. This is something that we talk about all the time. He says, and I hope he shares it with you, he has 2 children in the Cumberland school system. And one in elementary school and one in the middle school. And he has this really powerful message to say, about our responsibility to get students to proficiency. I hope you share that.
Thanks, Bob. Thank you. So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Antonio Damana, and I've had the pleasure of serving the Cumberland School Department for the better part of the past decade. First, as a principal at B.F. Norton Elementary School, and then I was fortunate enough to succeed Bob as the Assistant Superintendent of Schools. And there are two things that I'd like to share before I share that story and we focus on proficiency that I think set the stage culturally for a district to be able to succeed. The first is the relationships within your central office staff. And the reason why I bring that up is because Bob's relationship with myself, we are extremely philosophically aligned in how we complement each other's work. Bob has many, many strengths. I have different strengths, and we play off of those strengths. Our egos are set aside, and we really focus on conversations about teaching and learning every single day. Every single day. So I can't stress that enough. That relationship is very important. He supports my work. He allows me to do my job. And he allows me to make really, really important decisions around teaching and learning. And he trusts that I'm using my best judgment when I do those things. And I take that responsibility extremely seriously. The second thing that I think also sets the stage culturally is, and Bob alluded to it earlier, which is the relationship we have with our school committee. And I'm not just saying this because they sign my paycheck, but they work at a very high level with us. We have what's called an achievement subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of our school committee, and we meet with them on average 2 times a month. And the purpose of that committee is to really hold me accountable to make sure I'm doing my job, and that myself and my team are doing our job. And with that, we meet with them and we talk about things that are happening in the now and things that we want to accomplish in the future for where we want to go as a district. So to start our professional development conversation around proficiency, the beginning of the slide says we have a focus on a pursuit of student proficiency for all students. That is our mission. My mission in my office is to pursue student proficiency for all students. Well, how do we do that? First, we have a plan. We have a 3-year visionary plan for our elementary schools, our middle schools, and our high school. And our administration team, superintendent, we all contribute, teachers, we contribute to that vision that we have. Off of that, we also, in my office, I have 2 curriculum coordinators that are critical in this process, all right? One of our curriculum coordinators focuses on the humanities, ELA, social studies. The other curriculum coordinator focuses on the math and sciences, and they work directly with me every single day. Those 2 individuals have over 60 years worth of combined teaching experience in the district, which gives them a lot of credibility when we're doing work within our school district. We do not over-rely on outside consultants within our district. They're often very, very pricey, so we rely on our internal expertise. And the infrastructure that we create with our curriculum coordinators is that we partake in something called curriculum mapping and curriculum revision all year long. There's something going on every single week of every month for some grade level. And those curriculum coordinators are essential in driving that process. And we can't get to everything every year, so we try and prioritize what those needs are. And there are 2 things that we focus on as a district. One is we have a proactive approach, the things that we want to do, regardless, to improve our school district. And then the second approach is a reactive approach where we react to our data that's coming in. We cannot ignore that data. So when we receive data, it's giving us information about what we're doing well and what we need to focus on, and then we try to build a plan around that in a reactive way. So we try to do that very, very efficiently. I mentioned curriculum mapping that goes on. That happens on a monthly basis. For us, curriculum revision, assessment revision, and pedagogy are the crux and the fulcrum of everything we do in our district, and we have those conversations all the time. Superintendent Mitchell mentioned that Our teachers are a part of that. Well, a curriculum mapping session consists of teacher representatives from each grade level coming to our district, and they receive professional development on whatever the content may be. Usually it's about unpacking standards and a constant, persistent way of interpreting the standards. And in that, we try to get consensus on how we're interpreting the standards, and then we take that information and we ask those teacher leaders to go back to their grade level within their buildings, and we ask them to share that information in doses. So we don't do large, huge, one-day, PD. Certainly we have that built into our school year, and I'll talk about that in a second, but we give doses of professional development over a sustained period of time. Okay? That's our philosophy. The larger school days, like I think we have 3 professional development days in our district, whole days. My office is responsible for planning those. We do differentiate professional development for all the grade levels on those days, but the majority of those days is spent on what we call building-based PDs, where principals are allowed the autonomy to address their own building level dynamics and the things that they want to focus on in their respective buildings, because we have things that we want to accomplish that we see in patterns for our district, and then there are things that they see that they want to work on with teachers, nuances and things that they want to focus on within their respective buildings. And we give them the autonomy to be able to do that. So we try to strike that balance between district-driven professional development and building-based professional development. So when Superintendent Mitchell asked me to come on in and present with him, I wanted to think about, I tried to think about this procedurally, and I came up with 8 practices or procedures, and I promise you they'll be quick, that we do on a consistent basis that I feel helps us drive the proficiency levels or the trajectory of our proficiency that we've been gathering. The first is, well, the first challenge you have in your districts, respective districts, for your leadership teams is to make sure that they're focusing on the right things. And how do you know? Well, that depends on your district dynamic. It depends on your district's profile, what your district scores are, what your resources are within your respective districts. But you have to make sure, what is your entry point, essentially, is number one. And if you are using data and research-based practices to select what that focal point is, then you're going to get off to the right start. And I think Superintendent Mitchell mentioned that we've made some really good decisions that have anchored and allowed us to gather momentum in our district academically. The second thing that procedurally that we do is we do not chase initiatives. There is no diet pill effect in our district. We do not believe in that. We resist the temptations of colorful initiatives. It bogs down teachers. We want to keep them focused on the depth of their own learning and the depth around their pedagogy in classrooms, and we try to do that to the best of our ability. Are we perfect? Certainly not, but we work toward perfection. We also believe that in our district, it is my belief, that there are 2 different types of initiatives. There are initiatives that help improve a student's experience or their experiences, and then there are those initiatives that improve student performance, all right? And we try to delineate between those 2. The first, the student experiences, we leave that to the teachers and the principals to improve student experiences within their respective day-to-day buildings. My job in my office and people that work with me every single day, our job is to make sure that we are pursuing the performance of students improving every single day. So that's the third thing. We make a distinction there. The fourth is we keep our focus areas to an absolute minimum. We focus on that depth, and we try to stay there. The fifth thing is we then go to try and set up systems to support our decision making. So once we decide what we're going to focus on, what is it going to cost? What are the resources we're going to need? How are we going to build an infrastructure and the systems to support that so that we can execute it? So that you don't get something off the ground and then have to move away from it because we don't have the funding stream for it or because we don't have the capacity to sustain that. Because then that creates sort of this, like being in a car with someone that doesn't know how to drive a stick shift, right? Just start bucking and things start to go awry very, very quickly. The sixth thing is we do not stray. Bob said it. We stay the course. We do not stray. Even though our 3-year plan is an open document, it's a live document, it's constantly getting changed and revised, it's always focused on the same root principles. The seventh thing, we evaluate the process through extensive analysis. And what I mean by that is I also have a data coordinator that works in my office. And I do not have a traditional office with a traditional desk. My office is more of a conference room, kind of 21st century, I like to call it, type of collaborative room, and I do that very specifically for a specific reason. I want constant conversations going around teaching and learning. I don't want people in silos in my office working independently. At any point in the day, if you walk in my office, and Superintendent Mitchell will attest to this, there is always someone in my office and my conference room, and we're constantly looking at data, we're constantly doing things together. So we have an extremely collaborative approach to how we do this, and we do this every single day. So that's where the analysis gets done. And then lastly, we revisit the cycle. It's ongoing. It's mundane, actually. It's like exercise. It's consistency and persistency over time. And can it get quite boring? It's not boring because there's always new challenges and nuances, but we don't deviate from the things that we're trying to focus on. And we try to do the best we can to not be distracted by outside things that can easily distract us from our goals. So those are the 8 things that just generally frame it. I talked a little bit about our professional development infrastructure. Again, we rely on our teacher expertise. We do not rely on outside consultants, and we try to develop a system internally that allows for differentiation, and we do it in small doses over an extended period of time, okay? So at that point, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Tony. You didn't tell the story about your daughters. Yes.
So the story that Superintendent Mitchell's referring to is, in my office, we have a lot of philosophical conversations when we're going through this data analysis. And when I first got hired, I was on the soccer field when Superintendent Mitchell offered me the position. I remember the day after my daughters were playing soccer, and I live in town, as he had mentioned. And, you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of kids playing soccer on the soccer field. And I remember turning to my wife saying, you know, can you imagine the level of responsibility that I have in being the face of teaching and learning, as Bob calls my position, and having their educational trajectory really funneling through my decision making. And it really, really struck me as something really powerful. And how that played forward for me is we often talk about, so what is, if we to pick one thing that our teachers in our school district has a responsibility to do for my daughters, is every teacher that they encounter, every teacher that they come across, they have a responsibility to get my daughters to grade level proficiency. That's it. That's their number one job. And every teacher should approach every student in that district, in our district, in that manner. The 20 to 25 kids that are in front of them every year, whether they're in grade 1 or grade 8, grade 9, whatever, their job is to ensure or try their best to ensure that the majority, if not all of those students, are getting to grade level proficiency. That is what we try to pursue every single day. And I want that for my daughters, but I want it for all 4,700 students in our district, and that's what we frame our conversations around. And anything less than that is, in my opinion, not good enough. So.
Thank you, Tony. And it really is a tremendous responsibility, when you think about it, to get all students to proficiency or above, because we also have students who are ready and willing to take off, and we have a responsibility to help them fulfill their trajectory from a learning perspective. So just a couple of other things that I think are really important. Every decision we make is research and evidence-based. So for example, if we expect a teacher, it's not just teachers, by the way. It's teachers, it's math interventionists, reading interventionists, it is assistant principals, principals. If we expect anyone to change their practice in a positive way, then we have a responsibility to provide anywhere from 50 to 80 hours of professional development. That's what it takes. The research is crystal clear on that. 50 to 80 hours of professional development to change someone's practice. That's why we have made a decision, because we don't have a whole lot of money. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. That's why anytime nobody asks us anymore if they could go on those one-shot workshop professional developments, we don't support that. Because the research is clear, you're wasting your money. Because teachers aren't going to come back and implement what they learned in a 6-hour professional development session. It's just not going to happen. So, you know, I don't want to, you know, suggest for a moment that you shouldn't do that, but the research is pretty clear that you're not going to get a big bang for your buck if you allow that to happen. So I think that's a really important thing. So that's one of the challenges that we're faced with, right? We only have 3 professional development days. How do we get 50 to 80 hours of a professional development time to help individuals improve their practice? Well, that's, you know, that's one of those challenges that you have to figure out as a school system, right? Okay, so, you know, I am inspired by the things I see, the presentations I see on TED Talks. I'm inspired by, like this story that Tony told about our responsibility. Shame on us if we are not working like dogs to get all students to grade level proficiency. We have a responsibility to do that, regardless of the challenges that we all, you know, are faced with, right? So the word believe actually appears 15 times in our strategic plan, 15 times. And this next quote, I don't know who gets credit for it, but it is my favorite quote. And that is, whether you believe you can or believe you can't, you're right. Now, I'm going to tell you a story. This is a true story, and this is the sort of thing that really upsets me. And I can tell you that this is a true story that was shared with me by a colleague that I have enormous respect for. I think it's human nature for districts, when they get their state assessment results, to compare how their district performed to the next district over, or the districts over. So when I was the principal of Charahoe High School for 12 years, the first thing that we did was we were curious as to how Westerly did, right? And how South Kingstown did, and how Exeter West Greenwich did. And around Cumberland, the town of Cumberland, it's how did Lincoln do? How did Smithfield do? I mean, that's human nature. Now, should we be doing that? You know, probably not. But we're getting compared to Massachusetts, right? So it's human nature to make those comparisons. So imagine now, and I don't think it's necessary, it isn't necessary to be specific, but imagine this. So the next district over outperforms my district. We're not talking about my district. But a nearby district outperforms my school district. The principal of the building that was outperformed by the next district over stands up in front of his or her faculty and says that the reason they outperformed us was because of our demographic. Their demographic is better than ours. So here's what I believe. I believe that that leader, first of all, I don't believe that that leader should be a leader, in my opinion. But that leader gave permission for everybody in that room not to get their kids to proficiency. I'm telling you, it makes just thinking about it makes my blood boil. that person should not be leading a school. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about instructional leadership in a second. And here's, and what I'm telling you, we tell people this all the time. We tell our teachers these things all the time. There are no secrets about this. I believe we have a blue ribbon school in the North End where all the money is. And we have our lowest performing school is in the South End. In Cumberland, 295 separates the North from the South. And everybody knows it. But here's what I believe. I believe, and I've experienced it, I believe that the kids in the South can perform as well or better than the kids in the North. And I'm telling you right now, if you don't believe that that can happen, it's not going to happen. It's not easy, and it's incredibly challenging, but you have to believe that students in one area of the town or one area of the state can perform as well as those communities that are performing exceptionally well. And if you don't believe it, it's not going to happen. So we talk about those things all the time. No one in my life is ever going to convince me that that can't happen. And if you don't think it's going to happen, it's not going to happen. So we talk about those things all the time. It's not easy. So one of the things that we have done is, and Tim Duffy mentioned this when he was introducing Tony and me, is we have this slogan, if you will, no excuses, only results. And at Tony, when he was a principal at B.F. Norton, had some T-shirts made up that, that said on the front, no excuses, and in the back, only results. And at the time, I was the assistant superintendent, and I was lucky enough to get one of those T-shirts. Very handsome shirt, by the way. And I would wear this shirt to the gym, and I was amazed at how many comments I got about this T-shirt. People loved the T-shirt. So that was really the first year or second year that we started working together. And then over the last couple of years, we've been working together as superintendent and assistant superintendent. And these kinds of things inspire me, right? Like, it means something to me when I see a shirt that has a really cool slogan on it. So we decided, during our administrative retreat in August, this past August, I shared this idea with all of our leadership team, and I said, how do you all feel about finding a way to get a T-shirt for all of our staff in the district? And everybody thought that was a great idea. So we had this T-shirt designed. It says, on the front, no excuses, and on the back, only results, right? So here's the point. That regardless of the challenges that we face, we got to find a way to move kids. We have a responsibility to do that. And if we can't do it, shame on us. We got to step aside and give somebody else a chance. So we got all of the adults, including the school committee, one of these T-shirts. And we made sure that, it didn't cost the district anything. We found a way to, many of us paid for these shirts out of our own pockets. And we designate specific days, we professional development days. Like one of our schools, the first Wednesday of every month, they wear their T-shirts. So there is a message there, either at a very conscious level or this subliminal message that regardless of the challenges that we're faced with, we're not going to make excuses. We're not going to, no one is going to stand up in front of a group of educators and say, the reason they outperformed us is because their demographic's better than ours. See, that's an excuse. How do you find a way to get 50 to 80 hours of professional development for your staff when you only have 3 days and, you know, subs are very difficult to find? That is a challenge, but you know what? We figured it out. And it's not easy, and people complain, you know, because we got people who have to cover classes that, you know, should be helping other kids with intervention and that sort of thing. It's not easy. But you know what? You want to know why we've moved from 17th to 4th? It's because of those decisions. It's not easy, and there are going to be some, and people sometimes complain. But we are doing what we believe is the right thing to do to help improve the performance of kids. Help improve the performance of adults. Because if we don't improve, they're not improving. That is, I can't stress that enough. Next slide, please, Tony. Oh. So that third bullet there, I'm glad you reminded me of that. See, and again, this is one of those things that inspires me. One of Tony's assistants, one of his team members, Deb Rude, one of his curriculum coordinators, incredibly talented educator. And the other one is Kathy Cardoza, really talented educator who works with him. And anyone who knows Deb can appreciate how much this means to her. So she says on occasion, imagine this responsibility, that as educators, we have an opportunity to change the trajectory of a child's life. You know what? We can do that. We can do that. If you believe you can do that, then you can do it. So things like that have a lot of meaning for me, and these are the kinds of things that I share with people all the time. So there is one of the last slides is on our per pupil expenditure based on the most recent numbers provided by the Department of Ed. We definitely encourage teacher leadership. We have some incredibly talented leaders, so it's not, I mean, we sometimes bring in outside people to help us, but our goal is to train our teachers to be trainers. So we use, to maximize the limited amount of professional development money that we have, we use the train the trainer model. So we identify really talented teachers we focus on training them, and then they in turn train their colleagues. That is a model that has worked exceptionally well for us. And when you're all familiar with John Hattie? John Hattie is this, we use John Hattie's research a lot. John Hattie has done an extensive amount of research over the years, and he identifies those strategies that most significantly improve student performance. And one of the most significant things that we can do to improve student performance is provide opportunities for professionals to collaborate. And teachers love talking about their practice with their colleagues. So that is like one of the most important things. So we have teachers and other certified staff teaching their colleagues. Teachers teaching teachers. And you know what? This is one of those things that I get pretty fired up about. But I hear these stories that just blow my mind. Principals, assistant principals, must be instructional leaders. And I'm telling you right now, if your school leaders are not instructional leaders, your school, your students are not improving. Building leaders must be instructional leaders. I cannot, like, if there's one thing that you get out of this whole thing today, it's that. So, and what is an instructional leader? An instructional leader is locking in on data, looking at student performance data, having conversations with teachers and anyone else affiliated with that building, and talking about strategies that you're going to use to improve the performance of students. So I can't, you know what, I've had conversations with Commissioner Gist, I've had conversations with Commissioner Wagner. To me, you want to get the biggest bang for your educational buck in the state of Rhode Island, you focus on ensuring that your building leaders are instructional leaders. You have to be able to, you know, organizationally run a building. You know, there is an administrative part to what we do, but that's not the most important thing. So it is improving the performance of students and improving the performance of the adults. It's not just about student performance. Clearly, I'm beating that to death, right? Okay. All right, so here's the thing. And you know, we don't want to give anybody an excuse not to cut the amount of money that, that districts are getting. But as you can see, this is our per pupil expenditure based on the most recent data that has been provided to us by the Rhode Island Department of Ed. So our per pupil is $14,452. The state average is approximately $2,500. Is that right? More than that. Oh, $2,527. And can you imagine, even if we were at the state average, 4,500 times 2,520, boy, we'd be loaded. Oh, jeez. So, and you know what? So there are districts, and I'm not going to tell you who they are, it's insignificant, that are comparable. You know, we're pretty, you know, we have 4,600 kids. That's a pretty good sized district, right? 9 schools. There are districts that are comparable in size to us who are closer to the state average. And we are, it's not a competition, but we're significantly outperforming them. And the demographic's similar, right? So it's not just about the money. Are there things that we would like to do, that we would definitely do, that we believe would improve the performance of our students and staff? Yes, if we had more money. And we're concerned that we're going to have to make cuts. So, again, it all gets back to this. It really does. It all gets back to no excuses, only results. It does. So I'm amazed that, like, one of the things that is, if you look at our student to teacher ratio, it is significantly higher than most other places. So there are districts that have lots and lots and lots of people. That's where the money is. But the question is, how is the investment in those folks impacting the performance of your kids? That's the question. How is your investment in all the adults? That's where the money is. Money's in people. It's not in things. How is that investment impacting the performance of your students? And that's why I keep getting back to this tremendous responsibility that I've always felt as an administrator to improve the performance of the students in my building. That's on me. A lot of sleepless nights thinking about that. So I can't emphasize enough how important educational leadership is. Tony, is there anything else that you wanted to share, or are we good? So thank you all for listening to me rant. I appreciate that. Oh, thank you.